finally, we get to the finishing the mix, right? And this is where we revisit the three-tiered mixing system, because now we can take all of the stuff that we've done on the individual track level, and now we could start to pull together those mix stems. And now we're going to get into some of the other levels of processing, which are not really covered in the other sections. So we're going to talk about saturation processing. There's a lot of emulation now of vintage consoles, their bus architecture, right? So the actual sound characteristic of an SSL console, a Neve console, an API console, and whatever else you have, the summing amplification that's used and the circuitry that's used, it has a certain sonic tonal characteristic, and we could start to employ those elements, bringing in tape-based distortion, right? Harmonic distortion characteristics, which can help to add that extra layer of depth onto the top to really just take and enhance everything that you've done and just make it that more solid and image better and tweak. You could even put like a very light, generally you could do light, you could do heavy compression on the mix bus. But what we're really doing is we're sort of taking the mix now and we're preparing it for the mastering process, right? So we're doing our final tweaks and honing everything in. So this is sort of taking like, after you've done all of this incredible work with everything, now we're just taking the lens and we're tweaking it a little bit so everything comes just that little bit more into focus, right? And so there are many ways of doing that, and I'll show you those techniques and ways of doing that, and how you print the final mix and how you actually print it so that when you give it to the mastering engineer, it's in a format where they can use it and make the most of the process that they have to do. Right. So finishing the mix. This is a stage where a lot of people just sort of drop the ball. It's like, I got it. This is all really good. Everybody's really happy. This is the place where you can really, really just give it that extra focus before it goes off to mastering. Right. And we'll also talk about how you archive, right, and wrap up the mix so that, those plugins that you have now, maybe for Pro Tools 10, when you get to Pro Tools 12 and those plugins don't exist anymore because the company didn't make the AAX version, then, and you want to go back and revisit that, you want to make sure that you can, burn those effects, right, into audio files, right, and archive those things, especially like software instruments and things. Companies go out of business. The software gets updated, operating systems and Apple are like flipping around every 3 months, it seems, and software updates. So, compatibility issues. And so you want to be able to preserve and archive your masterpiece so that if it needs to be revisited later, you're able to get back to that original the way that it was. Right. So, and that will kind of, wrap up the whole course, so that's really, that's really the whole thing, the whole basic mixing course kind of wrapped up, right, in 8 weeks. So it really takes it, and I've laid this out in a very linear way, okay? And I've done this because we can now break down very intricate ways how each of those different elements plays into how a mix actually works, right? And how we can work with all those controls and utilize them, right, the way that they actually work in our physical universe, right? So use them with an understanding of how we perceive audio in our real world, because that's something that you can't escape. And so you have the ability to tap in to those things, exaggerate them to the point where they sort of escape the speakers, right? When you listen to something and it sounds dynamic and alive, it's like the speakers aren't really there, right? You feel the music. It enters the space with you. That's what this whole mixing course is all about. And so what I'll be doing through this course is actually not just talking you through the way that I've done here, but also leading by example and taking a mix and taking it through this whole course throughout the 8 weeks. And that way you can actually have a video showing me mixing, giving away all my mixing secrets to you, right, for this low price, so that you can, you can actually take those skills and start to really hone them so that you can increase your capabilities, make more professional sounding mixes. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. You're not going to take this 8-week course and have the same level of understanding and experience of an engineer who's been mixing for 20 years. You can't do that. It doesn't happen. Nobody picks up a guitar. Very, very, very few people pick up a guitar and after 2 months of playing, play like Jeff Beck. Okay, it just doesn't happen that way, right? So it takes practice and time, right? It is an art form. There is no question about it, because even if you understand all these things, you still have to study how mixes are put together and make actual creative decisions about where you want to move things in a mix. Maybe you don't want the vocal to be way up front. Maybe you want it to be in the back, right? And so now you're playing with audio like Play-Doh, right? And so you can just take Play-Doh and you can make a little Mr. Bill, right? Or whatever. If those of you guys have go back to old Saturday Night Live episodes, right? So it's like you could just play with it and play with audio. And that's what makes it so much fun, right? You want to be able, you don't want to be frustrated, like you're trying to make this and you're doing all these things and nothing is working. When you start to understand how the tools work, you may still fumble a lot with them, but at least when you do something, you'll understand what its effect is supposed to be in the mix. And then when you run through stumbling blocks, you'll start to slowly realize, well, oh, I see this effect is interfering with this effect, and that's why the two aren't working together. And that's really what the whole system is about, right? And that's what I designed this course for.